Here we are the next day. The hog carcass has been hanging, has cooled down nicely, and now it's time to cut it up. Now, if this were a market hog, we would cut up the primal cuts, which is kind of an industry term for cutting a carcass up exactly the same way, no matter who's doing it or when you're doing it. Now, I want to show you a book that I love and that I use. You can get this at Tractor Supply. It's the complete book of butchering. You can read the rest of it, but it shows all the different animals. And when we go to pork, I'll show you what we have right here. Super scientific, huh? So what we're doing first, since the head's already been taken off, we use the meat off of the head. We don't do any of the head cheese stuff, but there's good meat on it. So we do use that. We're trying to use every part of this, but because we are cutting this hog up into cubes, most of it, and making sausages and brats, we're gonna cut this up a little bit different than what we normally would if we were sending this to the market. So, but what we're cutting first is right in this area right here. It's 3 ribs back from the neck bone, so 3 ribs back. We're gonna look for that in a second. But this, would be the Boston butt, and then the picnic ham, and then a hock. But we're gonna keep that all together and we're gonna cube it inside, and we'll show you that. So, highly recommend this book. You'll find it with the other books, Tractor Supply. Now, one of the things I have to keep saying is you need a super sharp knife. And this is an inexpensive knife that came from a butchering kit from one of the stores like Dick's Sporting Goods or probably Cabela's. So it's not a super expensive one, but it's really stiff and it gets super sharp. So keep your knife sharp. We have the expensive blades inside for the next step of the process, but what I'm gonna do first to finish splitting that carcass up is to first work through that meat with the knife, then I'll finish sawing through the bones with the saw. And now the saw of all saws. Again, you could use a Sawzall with a stainless steel blade, but I'm out of those, so we're gonna do it old school with this. I wanna remind you, like I said earlier the other night when we did the skinning and stuff, is this pig's breed is bred to not have a ton of fat on it, but we need as much fat as we can. I've butchered hogs before where the fat was 3 or 4 inches thick. This is more like a 1/2 to 1 inch thick, so that's good. Plus, we pay close attention around here of what we feed them so we don't fatten them up. We want them to build muscle and not too much fat. Okay, so let's finish cutting this and then we'll get on to cutting that front shoulder area off. We will also take this opportunity to clean up a little bit inside of there. Then I'm going to show you where that 3rd rib is. This is a 1/2 of the carcass that has been cut. Now, these primal cuts, a lot of them are based off of the number of ribs that you count and location on the body. This will be the same in all of the animals that you're doing. Now, the primals will be different in different animals like lambs and beef, stuff like that, but yeah, that anatomy is the same, so the rib counting might be a little bit different in those other animals. But we're gonna start looking for these ribs. You have the neck bone, you got rib number 1, rib number 2, rib number 3, and that's where you want to cut. We do it first with a knife because that meat and fat can gum up the blade on the meat saw. And we take it right through here. You can see right there is some bone. And then of course, out on the spine. All right, you can see this incision that I've made right here with this super sharp knife. Now I'm just gonna put that saw in there and I'm gonna cut the bones. Now it's gonna be heavy. I have a tarp on the ground because I don't want it to drop in the mud. But I'm gonna hold on tight because you got one hand with the saw, one hand on the meat. So if you got somebody to help you, it might be a good idea. Put on the gloves, have somebody hold that. But for me, I'm gonna cut this off. It's gonna go into a bin that I have right over here. And then we're gonna bring it inside and we're gonna cube it up. So that's what you have. This, as I mentioned, would be cut into several pieces, but for now we're going to take it in and we're going to cut it up. All right, I took that other shoulder off, as you can see. Now remember, if this were getting cut up for market, this next cut would be different than what I'm doing. At the market, they would cut this whole chunk off and then separate it into ribs, bacon, I guess pork belly, pork chops, things like that. But what I'm most interested in, cutting off the loins here. And for you people that have butchered your own deer, this is the same kind of cut. That's called the back strap. We're gonna call this the loins. We're gonna cut them off, both of these, bring them inside. I'll show you something neat that you can do with it. But ultimately, that's gonna be ground up and put into our sausages and brats. So it's very, the way this is set up is it runs on top of the rib cage. There's like a little, not quite a U shape, maybe a J shape area along the entire rib cage and spine, and that loin sits in there. So that's what we try to find with our knife. And I've switched knives over to a super sharp fillet knife just to kind of pick away at this, see how it goes. I'll be honest with you, when I'm doing this, I'm drooling. I'm thinking about it going on the grill. Not just in brats, but underneath here, look at it. We're talking about ribs under there, and we're gonna keep those. If you haven't noticed, yeah, I'm left-handed, so that's why some of these camera angles are a little bit different. But I'll show you this in a second. Probably see a little bit better on that other half what I'm doing. All right, check that out. That's a back strap right there. And again, depending on the cuts, parts of this is pork chops, parts of this is loin. And if you were cutting with the bone in, they kind of look like a steak, a porterhouse, whatever it is. But that's a loin. We're most interested in cubing that up and putting it in the grinder. But I'm going to show you something special that you can do. Look at that cut. Ooh, what could you do with that? I'll show you inside in a minute. Let's do the other side. Check this out. You can almost see that separation of where that loin is. See that right there? That's the loin. And it is tucked up against the meat that we need to use for bacon. So you have to be very careful to dissect it out of there properly so you don't lose any of that bacon meat. Here we go. We want to start up here again. Taking that knife along the spine and just kind of working your way down. Butchering brings out the barn cats. That's what you hear in the background. Coco, what? At this point, if you're wondering, yes, we are saving everything that we can save and we're gonna put all the bones that we have left on the smoker. Wait till you see that. That makes a mean smoky pork broth. Great for split pea soup and other delicious dishes that Stephanie can show you all about. For me, get this loin off here and stop talking. Enough talk, let's cut. All right, so now you see there's that spine. I don't mind if there's a little bit of meat on there. When it goes in the smoker, it makes it taste better. What do you want, kitty cat? A little chunk of meat? Here. There you go. You stay out of our meat, cat. Eat it. Crazy cat. All right, when we come back, the next stage is to start peeling off all of this meat for bacon. That's right, I said bacon. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, here is a quiz. Do you know what this area is going to become? Oh, ho, ho. If you said ribs, you would be right. We're going to cut those into ribs next. But first, we're going to get the slab of side pork off that other side. Then, we'll cut those ribs. What I'm doing is just running this knife along the ribs. I want to peel that whole amount of, it's kind of like a mixture of layers of muscle and fat. Most of the trimming happens inside, but I'm pulling off the fat from some of that side pork so that we can use it to grind up in those brats. That's good fat. We need that for the brat, so I'm gonna just shave it off there right now. It's a little easier for me than over in the bin, so I'll do what I want. You gotta have some freestyle in you. You know, you can be technical, but you know, if your brain says, hey, I want to cut off the fat, cut off the fat. All right, we got it off. Pop quiz time. What does the edge of this look like? The edge of that looks like bacon. Isn't that cool? That's where it comes from. Now, we get to have some fun. Remember, if we were cutting this up in a butcher shop for all the choice cuts that go into the display, we would do this differently. So, but here we're gonna cut the ribs off while it's hanging. It's a little bit different to do it that way, but that's the way I'm gonna choose to do it. And before we do that, anybody that's watching that's done this before said, he's forgetting about a very important cut. And I haven't forgot about it. It's a prized cut on anything with 4 legs, including deer, beef, hogs, you name it. And that is, you guessed it, the inner loin. So I'm going to pluck those out real quick. All right, check it out. Yeah, man. Pork medallions, you can make that. You can take this whole thing and roast it. Man, I almost want to throw that puppy on the grill. We'll see. For now, let's stick to it. Get back to cutting. So there's the other side. Now, for your bone-in cuts, pork chops or whatever that cut is closer to the back leg, this inner loin is actually part of it. And on beef, lamb, maybe even here if you call it a porterhouse, this inner loin is actually what that smaller side of the porterhouse is. So it's very good. You don't want to miss it. And if you were watching and wondering if I was going to miss it, do I get an attaboy? Attaboy! Well, let's see if we can show you where those were. So those inner loins are right there. See that? They're right inside. All these muscles allow those four-legged animals to move side to side, up and down, and they're tasty. Since this is not butcher school, this is more like butchering a pig behind the barn school, I'm going to cut the ribs while it's hanging. As I mentioned, normally you would cut this off ahead of time and have all the meat on it. You pull all the meat off on the butcher table. But here, I'm going to try not to knock the rest of the meat off, and I'm going to cut these ribs while it's up here. Now, you can see they already look tasty, and I cannot wait. So I'm going to cut them in half, right like that. You get 2 sets of ribs. And if I'm lucky, maybe I can eat them soon, because they look delicious. There you go, some ribs. Now, some of these ends that you cut can be sharp, because again, we didn't use a bandsaw, we used a handsaw. So, back behind the barn, butcher. Back behind the barn, butcher. Look at that rack. Can I have a full rack of rib, please? You bet. Look at that. The ribs. Oh, even though we peeled off all that side pork for bacon, there's still so much meat on there. Delicious. Look at that. Isn't that just cool? And then we'll take out this last piece of the ribs and we'll cut that spine off and get those hindquarters inside and start cubing them up. We're going to save that spine too, throw that on the smoker. So if you're ordering a rack of pork ribs at your favorite barbecue restaurant, that's what you're getting. Somebody did what I did, maybe with less primitive tools, but they might not be having as much fun as I'm having. You know what's more fun than cutting ribs off of your own hog that you raised? That's right, eating them. This long one I'm going to cut in a couple pieces just so it stores and fits in the stock pot. Whew. All right. We haven't always had a tractor here at the farm. A lot of the stuff that we've done, from carrying buckets of sap from maple trees, 1,500 feet back that way. It's like a third of a mile, I guess. But the tractor does come in handy, and I'm going to use it to take these hindquarters down where I can grab a hold of them. If you don't have a tractor, you can still do this. Just take your time, methodical, nice and slow, piece by piece. Don't rush it, and you'll be all right. And I've done it before, so I feel for you, and I know that you can do it. But since we have a tractor here, I'm going to do what this new version of myself would do, and that's use the tractor instead of trying to force it. So let me move that in over here, and we'll get ready to finish this up. And other than cutting it up inside, you see, it's not that big of a deal. You just have to do it. And I remember there was a line in a movie once that said, the only difference between a person that has courage and a person that doesn't is that that person with courage has a clearer view of the outcome. And you could say the same thing with experience. So those with experience already know that it's not too bad. Just make sure that you do it step by step. Have some fun, be safe, and enjoy it when it goes on the grill. All right, back at it. It's starting to snow a little bit. That's all right, better than rain. Here is question for extra credit. Do you know the Muffin Man? No, I'm kidding. Do you know what the hoofs are called in other parts of the world? Actually, in the world, all around the planet. Do you know what those are called? They're a delicacy. That's right. They're called trotters. Trotters. I think we're going to pass. I mean, there's meat on there. We'll set them aside for some family member that I know that probably wouldn't mind eating some trotters. For me, I got to figure out how to get this big honking hind leg off of here so they can cut the trotter off of it and bring it inside without dropping it in the mud. This is a tricky part, so take it slow and easy. Be careful. Make sure that you have a decent tarp underneath there in case it does fall so that you don't put this in the mud. It's not the end of the world. You can wash it off, but we know about cleanliness and meat, so let's keep it clean. See what we can do. This may be easier and more sanitary to take this off of here and go cut them on the table. I'm gonna try that. Wish me luck. Yeah, it seems safer to cut them on the table. Just cut the trotters off right there. A trotter. Remember that. Might come in handy someday. Trotter. Because it trots. See what I'm saying? Well, I don't know if I can leave one of those here with those cats meowing and walking around. I don't want one gnawing on that nice meat. So I guess I'll either carry it or find that wagon. It's alright. That's why you stay in shape on a farm. That's one of the great things about it. You're always working. You have to think about stuff. And that's how it goes. You eat good food too. It's worth it. I'm telling you, it's worth it. Alright, with this hog completely cut up, parts of it in the fridge, other parts getting cut up and put on the porch to almost freeze tonight, but not quite, just crystallize. It means we're going to check in later on the next stage of the process. For now, this was outside, and thanks for hanging with me in the wintry mix that's coming down here. See you inside.
If you have questions for Adam, email him at hybridhomeguy@gmail.com. Stay tuned for part 3. Subscribe to our channel so you do not miss it.
See you later.